I'll assemble this diaphragm. So we'll start with the retainer plate. That goes dimple sides down. These blades, they're not symmetrical. The rivets are at different points on the blades at each end. The rivets that I'm putting in the plate here are closer to the centre line of the blade. There's 10 blades. First 6 are easy enough. Just get them seated. I think that blade's already moved out of position. Start again, that one's moved. If the blades are not dead flat, which is normally something that you can put down to the blades having been oily at some stage and so ending up distorted, then you can have an awful lot of trouble getting everything to assemble correctly because the pivot points keep coming out of the plate while you're trying to place things. Alright, so that's the first 6 blades placed. Now I've got to pull back these earlier blades to uncover the holes for the next blade. Three more to go. Be cautious doing this. It's easy to catch the blade with the tip of your, I'm using a toothpick here to steer them about. It's easy to catch the toothpick on the edge of the blade and flick one completely off. In which case, you've got to start again. Now don't be over concerned about the possibility of that because it's not uncommon to have to do this considerably more than once. This is our last blade. Alright, with the 10 blades in position now I've got to swing these ones back over the top of those blades without disturbing anything. Like that. Now the moving plate. That goes on, and it only goes on in one position. And I happen to know that the correct position is going to be there. So I've got to get that on there, make sure that all the pivots come up through the plate. Like that. Now the case goes on, and it only goes on in one position. There are 3 screw holes in the plate, and they can end up here, here and here. They're not equally spaced, so you can tell where you need to be. If I flip my jig over I can lift off the outside piece, slide it in underneath, and I can see my fixing screw holes here in the plate. Now one of those was countersunk, so I'll find the screw for that first. You can see which the countersunk hole is, and get these screws lightly into place. Now at this stage I don't know that all the blades are correctly seated still, so don't tighten the screws right up. You just want them done up lightly to hold things in position. That's the third one. That'll do, we can get rid of that. So I'm looking here to make sure that the 10 pivots are correctly seated in the holes, and they all are. Just turn those screws up very lightly. And check the action to make sure that the pivots on this side are in the slots in that plate correctly. And they are. You can see that that moves in and out nice and smoothly. So at that stage I can tighten those 3 screws up. And the next thing I want to do is fit the settings lever. So first I need to swing this across until that hole lines up with the hole in the cover plate here. Just going to change this camera battery. Okay, this setting lever, let's put that in place. Now I'm just going to give this surface a light wipe with molybdenum paste and around the inside edge there for good measure. That fits on the case here. It only goes one way. There's notches in the case. This is on the opposite side. So lining up the hole with the hole in the lever, get the first screw started, and here you can see I'm supporting that ring with my fingers from underneath. Get that hole lined up there. And get the second screw started. Now I support that on the edge of my wooden block. I can tighten that screw up. Tighten that one. Tighten that one. So they're tight. And that's my lever back on there. That moves nice and smoothly. But most importantly, I know that there are no contaminants on the blades, that the blades themselves move very easily. And any resistance I feel here is just the controlled resistance of this plate on the back of the case, which I've got a bit of, gave that a wipe of molybdenum paste, so it moves very smoothly indeed. So that's the case. And of course we have our mechanism plate here, so we can assemble the two together. First thing I do is unhook that spring, swing the arm out into the blade's open position, and now I need to fit the shutter blades in place. The first shutter blade is identified by the fact that it has an extra hole in it. Why does it have an extra hole in it? To identify as the first shutter blade. What difference does that make to anyone? Nothing at all. Let's Get that blade in place. All the other blades are identical. And the blade with the extra hole in it, that's its only difference. So would it make any difference whether you put them in somewhere else? No. Shutter blades are just laid one on top of another. So there is a first and a last. Diaphragm blades, of course, because they're interleaved, there is no first and last position. Okay, so there's the blades. They're all sitting on the mechanism plate. That's ready to go. And I can put the case on the top. Now, as with the other retainer plate, these three holes are not equidistant. So it's usually not hard to figure out where you need to put things. To help us along, let's swing that blade in a bit. See this little cutout in here, that rectangular cutout, that matches this piece here. So we know that the case goes on here. Just line up those screw holes. And there are 3 screws hold the mechanism plate and the case together. It's not lining up very well. It's not sitting down. That's better. That plate was not sitting down correctly. Now we're in business. Run the 3 screws down lightly, just as for the diaphragm blades. Don't tighten the screws up until you're completely happy that everything is assembled correctly. You do not want to damage those blades by trapping a blade between a pin and a plate because it was sitting in the wrong position. Check that those blades move freely. They do, but there's a problem. What's the problem? I put the blades in back to front. The blades are in upside down, around the wrong way. So when the blades are closed here, the blades are open here. When this lever's across here, those blades should be closed. So I put those blades on back to front. I must need another cup of coffee. That blade actuating ring must have moved before I went to put the blades back in place, because I started off with it in the blades open position, you might remember. It blades off, blades open position. Right, let's get this done correctly this time. There's my magic toothpick. There are some shutters where it is actually possible to get a proper working shutter out of putting the blades in the wrong way round, except that the blades always start open. When you release the shutter, they close for the preset time and then they open again. Not much use for photography, but a great novelty. Well, let's get our case in place. this time. That looks a bit better. Took the spring in place, check that the blades move nicely, they do. Tighten up the 3 screws. So our basic shutter's now complete. The blades are clean, they're all in place, everything moves nicely. Our retard gear train here swings in and out freely, that's good. The diaphragm, that moves nicely. So all the hard work's really been done. Now I just need to clean up the other components and fit them back to the plate. And I'll start here with the flash contact. First this plate goes in. Now getting this back in place, you've got a square peg to go in a square hole, except the square peg is usually anything but square. That plastic is usually cracked and split and often needs to be prodded and poked to get it to go down the hole. That one, to make a liar of me, went easily. Single screw holds that in place, that little brass screw, don't over tighten it. If you break that plastic piece you won't like it. Alright, what's next? Next is everything that I'm going to have to clean. So I'll clean these other components with a bit of naphtha and a cotton bud, and there's nothing exciting in that. And then we'll reassemble the shutter. Okay, I can start putting some of these pieces back in place. We'll drop the pallets back in place. Now that pallets, the top surface is slightly rounded, the bottom surface has got sharp corners. Put it in that way up, you won't go far wrong. This little cam piece here, normally I give the toe of that cam a white with molybdenum paste. That's where the flash contact lever runs on, and that just ensures that it swings across smoothly. A 500th of a second speed spring can go on there, and our moving flash contact can go on here. Make sure that the arm here is not sitting on the top of that lobe of the cam, that it's free of it, otherwise you'll bend the arm. As this comes round, you'll see that it flips the flash contact here, goes past the toe of the cam and then releases. Okay, that part's good. Let's tighten that screw down. That other one I got earlier. We have this little lever. Now the pointy end of this, I'm wiping a bit of molybdenum paste on that. That's where it catches. That's just so it'll release or catch easily and get this seated over its post. Trying not to disturb this piece at the same time. Okay, with this lever back under there blocking the action of this, this should have been sitting in a position where this could swing freely across there. Obviously it's not, so that's wrong. Let's swing that back to there. Now I've got one tooth out there. No. That's better. this arm should be free to move down along the side of that long cam there when that's in the rest position. The toe of the cam is pointing this way. Now I need to hook the spring between here and here. So that's in the cocked position. If I press this lever across, it would clear this thing and allow that arm to swing in, which would revolve the cam and make the flash contact. So that's sitting ready to go. Start with some more pieces. There are 2 brass standoffs. Go here and here. And the cover plate goes on here. Now the little tip of this has to hook into a slot in the case there. So that hooks under that lip. The cover has to go over this post and over this post, and we need to make sure that this spring is on the right side of the post. And that this arm sits here. There are 2 screws that hold that in place. The plain screw goes at this end. Make sure it goes through the brass standoff. If the brass standoffs fall out of position, they will come back and bite you, so it's worth making sure that you've got them in place. The lever for a flash sync goes through. I'll just tuck that under that spring and see if I can get this screw through the lever, through the top plate, through the brass standoff and into the plate, the mechanism plate itself. Tighten those 2 screws up. Now I need to get this spring in position. It needs to come back against that post there on the green lever. That swings nicely, so that's all good.